Slavery. By definition, it is a person who is forced to work for and obey another and is considered to be his or her property. Most people today would consider this awful and severely unjust. If you ask people in the southern United States during the mid-1800s, they would probably disagree. America was founded on freedom, and yet there were many people who were forced into servitude from the moment America began until December 6, 1865, after the 13th Amendment abolished slavery for good. In order for this generational cycle to end, there had to be a turning point. This is the little woman who started the war. Harriet Beecher Stowe was a Caucasian woman born in Litchfield, Connecticut on June 14, 1811. She was born to Lyman and Roxana Beecher and was one of 7 children. When she was 5, her mother passed away, and her older sister, Catherine, raised her. She had a well-rounded education at Litchfield Female Academy and later Hartford Female Seminary. Stowe then began teaching at Hartford Female Seminary from 1829 to 1832. In 1836, she met Calvin Stowe, a professor at Lane Seminary. They were married that same year and went on to have 7 children. Their relationship was one built on love and family, and Calvin constantly encouraged Harriet in her writing. This led her to write several newspaper articles and 30 books. During this time, America was greatly profiting from slave labor. Harriet Beecher Stowe noticed this and was enraged. Evidence shows that crops produced by slave labor, like sugarcane, cotton, tobacco, and rice, were valued at well over 1/2 of the gross national product. She recognized that these slaves were real people that deserved the same dignity and respect that she was afforded. She was already determined to fight for their rights, but when her son died from cholera in 1849, she felt an even greater empathy towards enslaved mothers who lost their children who had been sold away. It was then that she realized she should use her rights and human responsibility to make a stand. After the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 was passed, she wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin. Uncle Tom's Cabin is about a slave named Tom who grows up on a plantation in Kentucky. His owner, George Shelby, in financial ruin, was forced to sell Tom south to a harsh, cruel slave owner named Mr. Haley. On his way to the plantation, Tom is sold a second time to a man named St. Clair because his daughter, Eva, had grown very much attached to Tom. Tom lives in St. Clair's mansion until his death, where he is sold again to Mr. Simon Legree. Legree is an abusive, cruel slave owner and eventually kills Tom by whipping him to death because Tom refused to reveal where a pair of runaway slaves went. George Shelby hears of this and finally frees all of his slaves. Because of the success of this book, Stowe traveled much, speaking about Uncle Tom's Cabin and advocating for basic rights for the slaves all across the nation, and continued to work diligently to persuade others to donate to help end slavery and change the dominant societal view that slaves were just property. In 1873, Stowe decided to remain in Hartford, Connecticut, until her death in 1896. Although Uncle Tom's Cabin is a work of fiction, it is based on real situations and problems in America during the 1800s. The struggle of the slaves, as written in this book, is not an unrealistic image or dramatization, but rather an authentic and harsh reality that so many were faced with. The cries for help and abandonment were truly encapsulated in this art of literature and inspired so many others to write the same. Although some disliked her work, as slavery was both an economic and social part of the South, the numbers show that Uncle Tom's Cabin was widely more favored and sold than any pro-slavery book at the time. Uncle Tom's Cabin made the slaves' despair known instead of hidden behind the shadows or literary and literal barriers the South tried to enforce. Not everyone accepted Harriet Beecher Stowe or her ideals. Many hated her for her beliefs at the time, and others attempted to prove her wrong by writing antitheses, attempting to critique Stowe, show the slaves as content with their captivity, and portray all masters as benevolent. Aunt Phyllis's Cabin is a great example of this. Written in 1852 by Mary Henderson Eastman, it criticized abolitionists and praised slavery. The ultimate reason Aunt Phyllis's Cabin did not receive the same fame was because it was not as emotionally captivating as Stowe's novel, and by that time, the abolitionist movement had already taken off and was soaring. Additionally, many believe that Stowe did not have a right to a voice because she was a woman. Evidence shows that only 10% of books written during the 1800s were written by women. Many of the writing done by women was often overlooked. Therefore, writing books as a woman, especially about such a controversial topic, turned hearts and heads for the better. In short, 300,000 copies of Uncle Tom's Cabin were sold in its first year, reaching all around the globe. As this book's distribution was widespread, it set a true and clear precedent. Taking the responsibility to pave new paths hasn't always been easy, especially when said subjects deal with human rights. Stowe knew this, and by writing this timely novel, she helped lay the groundwork for rolling out of future events, such as the abolition of slavery, Brown versus the Board of Education, the Civil Rights Movement, and the Jackie Robinson integration saga. Many followed Stowe's footsteps and wrote their own anti-slavery novels. Though this angered many people, Stowe stood firm in her beliefs. In Stowe's words, "When you get into a tight place and everything goes against you, till it seems as if you couldn't hold on a minute longer, never give up then, for that's just the place and time that the tide'll turn." Stowe did receive support from certain famous people. Prince Albert and Queen Victoria were mailed a copy of Uncle Tom's Cabin. This gained support from Great Britain for the liberation of slaves in America. She encountered Frederick Douglass, a former slave who, at the time, became one of the most important and well-spoken anti-slavery leaders. They corresponded by letter. In one he wrote, "You, dear madam, can help the masses. You can do something for the thousands. And by lifting these from the depths of poverty and ignorance, you can make an educated ministry and an educated class possible." She even met with Abraham Lincoln, and the legend goes that upon meeting her, the president exclaimed, "So this is the little woman that started this great war." Although this quote is considered apocryphal, it does start to paint the picture of who Harriet Beecher Stowe was. Not only was she an abolitionist, she was an influential and controversial woman who changed the thoughts of many on what was considered normal or sometimes even humane. Instead of using her fame to glorify herself, she used it to free others. She used her human responsibility to help those in need and her right to speech and press for the benefit of others. Uncle Tom's Cabin inspired Americans to rise up against slavery and defend those in bondage. Stowe used her rights to stand up for the slaves and her responsibility to help her fellow men. Although many at that time disagreed with Stowe's ideals or proceedings, she truly proved to the world that upholding what you believe in and speaking out about things that are wrong is important and is a right that should not be taken away or lightly.
I've been walking with my face turned to the sun, weight on my shoulders, a bullet in my gun.